Are you a massive nerd? Do you want to live out your wildest fantasies, such as having stable employment, having friends, and having any sort of tangible impact on the world around you? Have you been listening to podcasts and seeing Matt Mercer memes all over the internet, but have been feeling left out because you don't actually know how to play D&D? If you answered yes to any of these questions, you're in the right place, because I'm about to teach you how to get started in Dungeons & Dragons. If you answered, "Who the hell are you?" to any of these questions, I'm Alice. Pleasure to make your acquaintance. I've been running, organizing, and playing tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons for give or take 10 years, and I specialize in bringing new players into the game. While this tutorial won't go over exactly what everything on the character sheet is used for within the game, or how to play it, the video will show you how to fill out what you need when first starting a game. Just don't expect an in-depth guide on what everything on the sheet actually does in the gameplay. For now, we're just focusing on things that affect the character sheet itself. So with all that out of the way, welcome to the D&D Character Creation Crash Course. Now, when first looking at this sheet, most new players will begin suspecting the individual organizing the game, hereafter known as the Dungeon Master, of handing them their cleverly disguised W-2 and trying to trick them into filing their taxes for them. But don't give up yet. I'm here to guide you through the whole process. For the most part, we'll be beginning on the left-hand side of the sheet and working our way through the right, top to bottom, filling out other boxes and tables as needed. A few of these will even be left blank by the end of this, which is fine because the things left blank will be elements that are gained throughout gameplay and are therefore not part of your character during creation. I should also mention that all information I reference here when creating my character sheet can be found at dnd5e.wikidot.com and roll20.net. Links in the description. First things first, the character name, personality traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws can all be whatever you want them to be, and there are no real rules beyond your Dungeon Master's discretion what can and cannot be written here. It should be noted that unlike most tutorials, in order to cover as much of character creation as possible, the example character that I am creating will be starting at character level 5. This means that the experience points section should be marked with any number from 6,500 to 13,999, as seen on this table listing what experience point values correspond with what levels. I will set mine to 6,500. Check with your Dungeon Master for an exact amount. You'll also notice that the proficiency bonus for your character at this level is +3, so you can go ahead and write that down in its associated bubble right here as well. At this point, you may also choose to select your character's alignment. Your alignment can be thought of as a sort of Myers-Briggs result for your morality rather than your personality. The alignment is across two axes, where you are either good, neutral, or evil, as well as either lawful, neutral, or chaotic. If you are neutral on both axes, you are considered to be true neutral. The good to evil axis represents how willing you are to harm others in order to further your own ambitions, and the lawful to chaotic axis represents how willing you are to follow some sort of rules or structure within a group you're associated with. Pick whatever combination you want, but for this character, I'm going with a free-spirited but charitable, chaotic good alignment. With the more abstract details out of the way, the first thing I like to do is pick a starting class, which is the main factor that will determine most of your character's abilities within the game. You can feel free to browse and pick whichever one you want, or you can just do what most players do and pick whichever one sounded cool, inevitably making your Dungeon Master cry when it turns out everybody picked a rogue and you sneak past every encounter he or she spent months planning and robbed the big bad evil guy blind within the first 15 minutes of starting a new game. For the purposes of this video, however, I will actually be making a multi-class character, where you pick multiple classes and the total levels among them reach your total character level. In this case, 4 levels of Bard with a single level of Fighter at the end for a total of 5 levels, as specified earlier. Next on the itinerary are your ability scores, which will affect many other aspects of the character sheet and are located on the left side over here. There are actually a number of different methods to pick these, the most common being through rolling dice or through a system called point buy. Ask your Dungeon Master exactly what method you're using to generate your ability scores. For this character, I will be demonstrating the point buy system. Starting out, all of your ability scores are 8, and you're given a number of points that you can spend on higher scores for your character, as seen on the table here. Most Dungeon Masters who run point buy games give each of their players 27 points to spend, so I'll spend 9 points on Charisma, 7 points on Strength, 7 on Dexterity, and 4 on Constitution. This will give me a total of 15 Charisma, 14 in both Strength and Dexterity, and a 12 in Constitution. Intelligence and Wisdom both stay at 8 because I did not spend any points on them. Note that while I mainly focused on Strength and Charisma, the ability scores you pick to prioritize may differ based on the class and/or playstyle of the character you choose to be. Before we move on, we'll also want to pick out a race for our character. While the rulebook officially calls this part of our character their race, the term race itself is a little deceptive, because rather than ethnicity, what we're actually picking is our character's species. For this video, I picked Dragonborn, because it increases strength and charisma, and I'm a scummy min-maxer who has to have the highest numbers on my character sheet at the table, or else I start to feel like my parents were right about me. Of course, you're free to pick whatever race feels best for your own character. Looking at the page for my chosen race, though, we see how much we increase our ability scores by our base movement speed, which we put in this bubble here, the languages we start the game knowing, which we can write in here, and a few other miscellaneous abilities, which we want to write out in this large box to the right. Sometimes, your race may present you with a few different options. For example, Dragonborn allows you to pick what species of dragon is in your lineage, which will have a few effects on the abilities it grants you. Be sure to note what decisions you make and the effect they have on your abilities. For this character, as you saw, I'm picking a gold dragon ancestry, which in turn affects the breath weapon and damage resist abilities. Now that we have the ability scores with our chosen race accounted for, we can move on to the next step. You see, these ability scores on their own normally aren't what we use in-game. We still need to find what's called our ability score modifiers. To find what each of your score's corresponding modifier is, you can refer to this chart. An easy way to remember without the chart, however, is to start at -1 for a score of 8, and increase the modifier by 1 for every other number. So 10 and 11 are 0, 12 and 13 are 1, and so on. For each ability score, write in its corresponding modifier in the bubble just below the score itself. With all of that done, we can start moving into the class-specific pieces of information. If you decided to multi-class like me, you'll have to pick one of your classes to be a quote-unquote main class that you would have taken at level 1. For mine, I'll be going with the Bard class. If you didn't multi-class, then your only class will be your main class. Now, look at the page for your main class and find the Proficiencies section. On the Saving Throws section of your character sheet, tick the boxes that appear in your main class's Proficiencies section. For each of these saving throws, write in a number equivalent to the value of your corresponding ability score modifier, but for any of the ones that you have the box ticked on, add proficiency bonus to the total as well. So in my case, my strength saving throw is 3, while my dexterity modifier of 2 plus my proficiency bonus of 3 makes my saving throw for dexterity a total of 5. Repeat this process for each saving throw. Filling out skills works very similar to saving throws, with the exception that we get to choose what boxes we tick for proficiency. Check your class's respective proficiencies section to see how many boxes you can tick and what skills you can choose from. Since I chose Bard as my main class, I get to pick whatever 3 skills I want, which I will go with Athletics, Deception, and Persuasion. Now, fill out a number for each skill just the same as the saving throws. Look at the skill's associated ability score, abbreviated in parentheses at the end of each skill, and write in the appropriate ability score modifier, adding your proficiency bonus to the total for the skills that you picked to be proficient in as well. The passive wisdom bubble beneath your skills is pretty easy to calculate. Just take your perception skill and add 10 to it. Then, write down the total in the passive wisdom bubble. Denote your weapon, armor, and tool proficiencies here in the same box where your languages are written. Unlike with saving throws or skills, you actually get to include the weapon, armor, and tool proficiencies across all of your classes here, not just your main one. Since my character is a fighter as well as a bard, I get to know all equipment proficiencies across both classes here. Be sure to check your own class's page and find the Proficiencies section to find the equipment that your character will be proficient with. Before we move back up to the top of your character sheet, we'll first need to pick out your character's starting equipment. On your main class page, under the Equipment section, you're given the choice between several goods that you can write out down here. If you're starting at a level higher than 1, you also get a metric shit ton of starting gold based on your level and the setting of your game, as can be seen on this chart. Be sure and ask your Dungeon Master what setting you're using. For the purposes of this character, I will be using the standard campaign column, meaning in addition to 500 free gold, I get to roll 1d10, better known as one 10-sided die, and multiply the result by 25, adding that number to my total gold. And I just so happened to roll a 5 as I was setting this up earlier, so I get an extra 125 gold for a grand total of 625, which I mark under the GP or gold pieces bubble here. At this point, now that you know your starting gold, you can spend it on equipment such as new weapons or armor. But before you start acting like you just found a credit card with the name Elon Musk printed on it, be sure to check with your class's equipment proficiencies you wrote in the bottom left to make sure that your character can properly wield what you're buying for them. I'm already content with the longsword I got from my main class equipment, so I will just buy some better armor in the form of a breastplate, leaving me with 225 gold. Whatever armor you decide to wear from your equipment table down here, take the value of that armor under the Armor class column and add your Dexterity modifier to it. Then put the result up here in the Armor class bubble. Even if your Dexterity modifier is negative, you'll have to add it to that Armor class value. That will mean that you'll be taking away from the value rather than adding to it. If you chose Medium Armor, you cannot add more than 2 from your Dexterity modifier to the Armor class, and if you chose Heavy Armor, you cannot add your Dexterity modifier at all. However, that includes negative Dexterity modifiers, meaning you can wear Heavy Armor with a crap Dexterity score and not have it lower your Armor class. If you pick a piece of armor with a number in the Strength column and do not have a Strength score, not modifier but score, equal to or greater than the number listed, then subtract 10 from the number in your Speed box. Now that your character is starting to come together, you may decide to pick a character background. Just like with class or race, you can browse through at your leisure or just pick whichever one sounded coolest. These give your character boons such as skill proficiencies, extra languages, and bonus equipment, so be sure and note these changes on your character sheet as needed. Write down any extra equipment, languages, or proficiencies you obtain, and add your proficiency bonus to the skills you have gained proficiency in. I'll pick Folk Hero, which will give me these features and equipment. Some backgrounds will give you proficiency with a set of Artisan's tools. If you gain this proficiency, Pick from the following list. For my character, I picked the Alchemist supplies. Your initiative score is pretty easy to calculate. All you have to do is copy your dexterity modifier and put it into the box here. Just keep in mind that some classes may have abilities that will change this score later on. To calculate your maximum hit points, check your main classes page for the amount of hit points you start with at level 1. In my case, it is 8 plus my Constitution modifier of 1 for a total of 9. Now, if you're starting at a level higher than 1, unfortunately your maximum hit points are going to require a bit of math. For every level after 1, add the amount listed by hit points at higher levels. There are 2 ways to add these points at higher levels. You get to pick one. You can either roll a die, the number of faces on which is denoted as 1dx, where x is the number of faces on the die, so 1d8 is an 8-sided die, 1d10 is a 10-sided die, etc. Or you can choose a flat number listed next to that type of die if you don't feel like gambling. No matter which one you choose, add your Constitution modifier to the total for each level as well. I will choose to add the flat number each time, which for bards you can see is 5. When I add the 1 from my Constitution modifier, the total goes up to 6 hit points per bard level after level 1. So when I add those 6 hit points to my current 9 for a total of 15 hit points when I hit level 2, I can then add another 6 for 21 hit points at level 3, and another 6 for 27 hit points at level 4. Since I am only a level 4 bard, I do not get to add any more hit points from this class's page. However, since I'm a level 1 fighter, I do get to add a level of hit points from the fighter class page. When multi-classing, even if you're taking your first class level in a given class, you can only use the number from the hit points at level 1 section if it is your main class. Otherwise, we still have to use the hit points at higher levels section. For the fighter, I am also going to choose the flat number. So for them, it's 6, and then adding my Constitution modifier on the end of it, that becomes 7 points for my level in fighter. This adds to my running total of 27 for a grand total of 34 maximum hit points, which I write out here. The current hit points box should also echo whatever you wrote in for your hit point maximum. Your hit dice are much simpler to calculate than your hit points. As notated earlier, a D8 is an 8-sided die, a D10 is a 10-sided die, a D12 would be a 12-sided die, etc. It stands to reason then that 2d8s, or as you'll see it noted in the rulebook, 2d8, will stand for 2 individual 8-sided dice. Same thing with 2d10 standing for 2 individual 10-sided dice, and so on and so forth. Looking at your class page, your hit dice section lists a type of die that you gain per level of that class. Since we have 4 levels of Bard, and the Bard's hit die is listed as 1d8 per level of Bard, we have 4d8 hit dice from our Bard class. Also, since we have a level of Fighter, and the Fighter class page lists its hit dice as 1d10 per Fighter level, we also have 1d10 from our level in Fighter. Find the number and types of each of your hit dice from your own class or classes and write them down in here. Then, just like with hit points, the current hit dice should be the same as what's written in your total. The box below your hit dice is made to be a convenient reference for useful information in combat regarding your most used attacks. In my character's case, I will input the information for when they attack with their longsword. Write the method of attack in the first box here. Then, for the attack bonus column, take your proficiency bonus and add it to either your strength modifier if your weapon was made for close quarters, or your dexterity modifier if it was made for ranged attacks. The dice you used for your weapon's damage, as well as its damage type, are listed under the page for weapons. You can use the box beneath to know any miscellaneous information about your character's weapons as well. If you're playing a class that does not cast spells, you may skip to step 23 at this point. Otherwise, continue on to step 19. If you're playing as a spellcasting class, look at the third page of your character sheet and note what class it is that you have that can cast spells. Now, look at the page for that class and find the section under Spellcasting marked Spellcasting Ability. Write down the ability this section lists as your class's spellcasting ability. Then, using the formula provided, calculate your spell save DC. For my character, it is 8 plus their proficiency bonus of 3 plus their charisma modifier of 3 for a total of 14. You'll also want to calculate the spell attack modifier, which is written in the spell attack bonus box of your character sheet. For my character, this is their proficiency bonus of 3, plus their charisma modifier of 3, for a total of 6. These formula may be different for your chosen class, so once again, be sure to check your own class's page for the appropriate formulas. While we're down here on the third sheet, take the number of levels you have in your spellcasting class and look at its associated row on the large table at the top of the class's page. Under your class's spell list page, browse and pick a number of spells from the cantrip tab equal to the number in the cantrips known column of your class table. So, for my level 4 bard, I can learn 3 cantrips. Write down all of your choices in the cantrips section of the spell sheet. For me, I will choose Vicious Mockery, Prestidigitation, and Mage Hand. Now, look at the part of the table that says Spell Slots per Level. Look at your levels row and note each number by each spell level column. Write them in the box by each appropriate spell level on your character sheet. For my character, as a level 4 bard, I get 4 first level spell slots and 3 second level spell slots. If your class has a spells known column, you can also pick a number of spells from other tabs equal to the total number in your level's spells known column. You can only pick a number of spells equal to your spells known across all spell level tabs, so be careful not to only learn spells from a single level if you can cast multiple levels of spells. Write each spell onto the lines under its corresponding level. Since my character can learn 7 spells as a level 4 bard, I choose to learn Cure Wounds, Detect Magic, Tasha's Hideous Laughter, Healing Word, Hold Person, Enlarge Reduce, and Invisibility. If you have levels in multiple spellcasting classes, you will need to print out extra copies of this third sheet and repeat steps 19 to 22 for every spellcasting class you have levels in. If your class does not have a spells known column, but still has a number of spell slots, simply pick a number of spells of each level equal to the appropriate spell level. So, for example, if I were making a level 5 wizard instead of my Bard Fighter hybrid, I could pick 4 spells from the level 1 tab, 3 spells from the second level tab, and 2 spells from the third level tab from the wizard's spell list. Once again, if you have levels in multiple spellcasting classes, you will need to print out extra copies of this third sheet and repeat steps 19 through 22 for every spellcasting class that you have levels in. At this point, your character is practically done. All you have left to do is look at the table at the top of your class page, or class pages if you're multi-classing, and read through what each powers under the feature column does, assuming you're a high enough level to obtain them anyway, so that you can note them on your character sheet. Be careful though, because many of these abilities will affect elements of your character sheet, which may in turn affect other elements of the sheet as well. Be sure to make these changes to your sheet as necessary. For the sake of the example, I will go ahead and finish this character, showing how these features can affect attributes we have already written down. Keep in mind, however, that the rest of this video will only be covering the specific cases of this happening for bards up to level 4 and first level fighters only. If you chose a different class or classes, the features that affect your character sheet, as well as the elements they affect, will almost certainly be different. Read your class page to know exactly what changes will have to be made for your character. With that said, let's continue. Normally, how I handle this part of character generation is to read the list of features from the table at the top of my class page from the top down, writing down the title of each feature as well as maybe a few notes to remind myself what it does before finally making any necessary changes to the character sheet. Since this video focuses only on the character creation part of D&D, most abilities will be breezed past, since they only affect your character during gameplay rather than at creation. So don't expect us to go into detail on what each feature does unless it directly affects what is written on the character sheet. Kicking things off are the features Spellcasting, Bardic Inspiration, and Jack of all trades. I already ran you through the parts of spellcasting that should be marked down on the third page of your character sheet, and Bardic Inspiration won't affect anything during character creation. Then we have Jack of all trades, which lets me add half of my proficiency bonus, rounded down, to any and all of my skills that I don't have that proficiency bubble ticked in. Since my proficiency bonus is 3, that means I get to add 1 to everything I haven't ticked in already. This will also cause a chain reaction since my perception increased by 1, so that means my passive wisdom has to increase by 1 as well. Neither Song of Rest nor Magical Inspiration do anything on character creation, so we can skip on to the next feature, Bard College, which will actually be getting its own step for reasons soon to be made clear. Bard College essentially lets me pick from a number of different topics for our character to have majored in during their education. Whatever choice I make, it's very important for me to take note of, because Bard College will actually wind up doing a lot for my character even at later levels. In fact, even if you're not playing as a bard, take notes here, because all other classes will also have a feature similar to this one, in that they'll get to choose from a variety of different options, all of which start giving your character even more features at later levels based on the choice you made. For most classes, but not all, this decision is made at level 3, and it's almost like picking a whole nother class within your class. For this reason, the choice you take in this special class feature is called your subclass. Anyway, for my character, I'll be picking the College of Lore. If you read the bonus features that grants me, you'll see that I get to pick another 3 skills to gain proficiency in. I will choose Performance, Sleight of Hand, and Stealth. If you noticed, I didn't increase each of those by my full proficiency bonus. This is because I also had to consider the ability Jack of all trades, which I marked earlier. Essentially, since each of those were untrained, they already gained a benefit from my first point of proficiency, but now that I'm proficient in them, I can give them the full bonus. So they would only have gained 2 more points in each rather than the full 3. If you look at the page for my subclass, you'll also notice that I gained an ability called Cutting Words, which I should mark on the right as well. However, this ability doesn't do anything that affects my character sheet, so we'll move on to the next step. The next 2 features that I get from my Bard classes are Expertise and Bardic Versatility. Bardic Versatility only really matters if we reach this level from leveling up, instead of just by being created at level 5. So we'll go ahead and dive into Expertise, which lets me pick 2 skills I'm already proficient in and double the proficiency bonus I receive for those 2 skills only, effectively increasing both of them by 3. I'll pick Athletics and Deception, so I have to increase both of those skills on my skill table over here. All classes have this ability score improvement item listed on their class table multiple times. This lets you pick any of your ability scores all the way over to the left here, and increase it by 2. This will effectively increase its associated modifier by 1, which will wind up increasing everything that includes said ability modifier as part of its calculation by 1 as well, such as its associated saving throw, its associated skills, and possibly even spellcasting stats such as saving throw DC and spell attack modifier. Alternatively, whenever you gain the ability score improvement feature, some dungeon masters allow you to forego the increase of an ability score to instead pick out a feat. No, not a class feature, a feat. Somehow, D&D didn't get the memo that when the word feat is used to describe a noun instead of a verb, it becomes short for the word feature, frustrating English majors everywhere, I'm sure. Regardless of the poor grammar, in D&D, a feat is somewhat different from a feature, and there are a dedicated list of feats that any character of any class can choose from instead of gaining that ability score increase, though they do sometimes have listed prerequisites. If you choose to take a feat instead of an ability score increase, write it down to the right with your other class features and adjust any other values on your character sheet as needed. For my character, I will choose the Sentinel feat instead of the ability score increase, which will not be affecting anything already written on our character sheet. If you're multi-classing like I am, and you've written down everything in the features column that you qualify for, again, like I have, then all you have left to do is repeat step 23 for all of your other classes as well. For me, this means I have 1 level of fighter to work through. This level of fighter gives me 2 abilities, the first of which is called Second Wind, which won't actually wind up doing anything to this character sheet. The second is called Fighting Style, which, somewhat like a subclass, I get to pick from a number of different abilities. They'll all impact my character in different ways. For me, I'll pick the Defense Fighting Style, which will increase my armor class by 1. Now that I've noted that down and all of my class features are accounted for, this character is complete. Thank you all for watching my presentation. With your character done, you can feel free to scroll down to the second page and fill in a lot of the flavor information, such as your age, eye color, skin tone, height, weight, etc. If you've been following along, but still found yourself feeling curious about what exactly a lot of these attributes are used for in the game itself, stay tuned. I'm planning on covering a much more in-depth guide on character creation soon, that not only covers the what, but the why as well, which should give you practically everything you need to know to join the table, as well as how to develop a character with intent towards certain actions. Until then, though, if you're a brand new player wanting to join a group and just can't wait to have these deeper questions about gameplay explained, I recommend going through the steps in this video with someone who has already played the game. They should be able to give you an overview of how each element of the character sheet is used in-game. Thanks again for watching, and happy adventuring!